Today I want to share a story that touched me deeply. It's about a young woman who fled the life others chose for her and found a place where memory, fire, and love still live. A story of quiet strength, and of belonging earned. Now let me begin. The wind came sharp off the ridge line, laced with the bitter bite of pine smoke and snow. It whistled through the seams of the canvas bunkhouse. Cold as regret, Lucy Monroe stepped out into the still dark morning, her boots crunching hard frost as she pulled her shawl tighter across her shoulders. The sky was the color of old Bruce's deep violet with a rim of sickly gold at the edges, promising another sunless day. The Hollow Ridge mining camp sat like a blister on the mountain's edge. A scatter of tents, 2 ramshackle cabins, and a weather-warped church stood against the winter wind. 27 men, 4 women, and not a soul among them, with clean hands. Lucy had counted them. She always counted. She was 18 and already carried the weary manner of someone older. Life had taught her to walk softly, speak rarely, and never meet a man's as longer than needed. The only thing that had kept her safe this long was being useful and invisible. She cooked. She hauled water. She swept out the chapel tent before Reverend Briggs droned his sermons about fire and sun. Her mother had died of the fever when Lucy was years back in Kansas. The man who took her in, George Harlan, called himself her stepfather, but acted more like a creditor. He was a mule skinner by trade, a drunk by habit, and a coward by nature. They dragged her west, chasing fortune through gold dust and broken promises. That morning, Lucy. Discover more. TV and video. Language translation tool. Real-time transcription service. Spotted George speaking with Merrick Sloan, the mine foreman. Tall and thick-shouldered, Sloan carried himself like a man who believed the land owed him something. His black coat flapped in the wind as he leaned in close to George, voice low, smile crooked like a snake's tail. Lucy ducked behind the cook tent and watched them from the corner of her eye. The way they stood, the way George wouldn't quite meet his Jesus, it made something go cold in her stomach. Later, George found her hauling firewood. "Put on your blue dress," he said without looking her way. His voice was rough, but not loud. That was always worse. "Wash your face. Tie your hair back proper. We've got company tonight." She stood frozen. "Who?" His eyes flicked toward her, flat and gray. "Don't ask me that again." That evening, the sky hung low with snow. Inside the supply tent, lit by 2 oil lamps and heavy with smoke. Merrick Sloan sipped from a glass of brandy and watched Lucy like she was a prize calf up for auction. "You're a quiet little thing," he said. "That's good. A man needs quiet when he comes home." George said nothing. He hadn't touched the drink Sloan poured him. He only nodded, hands clasped between his knees. "He can give her a roof," Sloan continued. "Flood protection, and I hear you've got some timber rights. Need settling." George grunted. That was as close as he'd come to a blessing. Lucy didn't speak. Her throat had closed up tight. The blue dress itched at her neck. Her mother had stitched the hem years ago, back when things were gentler, back when there was still music in the house. Later that night, in the bunkhouse, with the other women already asleep, Lucy packed what she could fit in a small cloth bundle. Her mother's locket, worn thin from years of holding it in her hand, a wool shawl with one torn corner, a small tin cup, a pocket knife barely sharp enough to slice bread. The camp was quiet as she slipped through the shadows. She kept low, stuck to the trees beyond the tents, boots crunching softly over ice-crusted snow. The cold bit through the dress within minutes. Her breath came quick and white, and she didn't dare look back. She didn't know where she was going, only that she was going. She followed the old game trail east, climbing higher along the ridge, past the tree and where the woods grew thick with black spruce and silence. Owls called once. A fox watched her from beneath a ledge, and vanished like so. The cold grew worse. Her shawl turned stiff. Her hands stung. Still she pressed on. She came to a boulder with a hollow at its base, half sheltered from the wind, and crawled inside. Her body shook with cold. Her teeth clacked so hard it hurt. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapped herself tight, and clutched the locket close. She didn't pray, not exactly, but she whispered her mother's name once like a promise. Then sleep came. A kind of sleep that felt like falling through snow. Slow, endless, silent. Far above her on the ridge where the pines thinned and the world stretched out in white silence. Someone watched. It didn't move right away, just stood there, boots sunk deep in snow, dark eyes scanning the trail she'd left behind her. His hair was tied back with a strip of leather. A bow rested across his shoulder. Red Greyhawk had seen 1,000 footprints in the snow. None like hers, none with that kind of desperation. And when he saw the locket, she clutched in frozen fingers, the small brass circle worn smooth by years he knew. That red thread tied to it was no accident. It was a sign, and it had found its way home. Lucy stirred before her eyes opened. For a moment, she felt nothing. No cold, no pain, no sense of time or place, only the slow return of sensation, the weight of her limbs, the ache in her feet, and the sharp sting of air against cracked lips. Then came the smell of smoke and pine, and something bitter like dried sage burned too close to the fire. She blinked. The world swam into focus. A low ceiling of rough-cut logs, shadows moving gently across it. Her cheek pressed against fur, real fur, thick and musky. A fire crackled nearby. Someone moved just out of view, slow and steady. She sat up too quickly, and the world tilted. A voice came, quiet, but firm. Don't. Lucy froze. Her heart thudded like hooves on hard ground. The man stepped into view. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in layered buckskin and wool, his hair black and tied back. His eyes dark and unreadable, met hers with calm, but no welcome. You need rest, he said. Lucy opened her mouth, then closed it. Her throat was too dry for words. She licked her lips, winced. Who are you? A crotch near the fire, added another piece of wood. Name's Reed. His voice had a rough edge like bark stripped from old wood. It didn't look at her again. Instead, he took a small pot from beside the fire, poured warm water into a tin cup, and handed it to her. Lucy's hands trembled as she took it. The warmth stung her palms. She drank slowly, carefully until the cup was empty. Reed stood, moved to the back of the small shelter, a hunting lodge, maybe built into the rock itself. One opening served as a door covered with a heavy wool curtain. 2 deer hides were stretched near the fire, and in the corner sat a bundle of gear, a bow, a quiver of arrows, a coil of rope. She looked down. Her boots had been removed. Her feet were wrapped in cloth clean, warm, and scented with something earthy. A blanket covered her legs. Whoever this man was, he'd cared enough to keep her alive. Where am I? She asked, her voice rough as gravel. High Ridge, South Face, he said simply. Storm came in last night. You would have died out there. Lucy looked into the fire. She wanted to argue, wanted to say she could have made it, but her body knew the truth. Every bruise, every cut said so. Why do you help me? She asked quietly. Reed turned. He walked over, crouched again, and held something in his hand. Her locket. This was around your neck, he said. She reached for it instinctively. He didn't stop her. Do you know what this is? He asked. She looked at the locket. The red thread looped through its chain had faded to rust, but it was still tied in a specific knot. Small, tight, and deliberate. My mother's, she said. She wore it always. Your mother Apache? Lucy blinked. No, I don't think so. She never said her name was Mai. Reed's gaze didn't soften, but it changed. A flicker of something behind his eyes, memory perhaps, or recognition. My grandmother used to tie thread like this, he murmured. To remember those taken, or lost, when silence settled thick as snowfall fall. The fire cracked once, sharp and sudden. Reed stood, moved to stir something in a clay pot resting near the coals. The scent of meat and wild herbs drifted into the air. Lucy's stomach turned on itself. He glanced over his shoulder. You hungry? She nodded. He ladled stew into a small wooden bowl and brought it to her. She took it with a quiet thank you and ate slowly. The broth was thin but warm. Bits of rabbit, wild carrot, and something green she didn't know. You're not from the camp, she said after a few bites. No. Do you live here? He nodded off and on alone. Another nod. Lucy set the bowl down on the floor beside her. I'm sorry I brought trouble. You didn't, he said, then paused. Yet, she looked up sharply. So, you ran, he added, tone neutral. Your boots were city-made, dress torn at the hem, frostbite starting into both feet. You left fast. Lucy didn't answer. I'm not asking, he said, just asking. She pulled the blanket tighter. He couldn't stay. He didn't press. Instead, he stood and moved to the curtain, pulling it back just enough to look outside. Wind howled beyond the stone. Snow fell sideways. You need to stay until the storm passes, he said. 2 days, maybe 3. She nodded. Thank you. Rayet turned. You don't know me. But Lucy wasn't so sure. In her world, nothing came free. Later, as the storm deepened and night pressed in, she lay beneath the heavy firs, listening to the wind scream against the mountainside. Rayet sat near the fire, carving something from a piece of wood. He hadn't spoken in hours, and yet she felt safer than she had in years. Before his sleep took her, she whispered one last thing. Why do you live out here? He didn't look up. Same reason you ran, he said. Some places ain't safe for people like us. And the fire burned on. The snow let up on the 3rd morning, but the cold dug in deeper, like it had made up its mind to stay. Outside the shelter, the world had turned bone-white and silent. No wind, no tracks, just stillness. Inside, the fire had burned low. Rayet stirred the embers with a blackened iron rod, coaxing new flame from the coals. Lucy sat bundled beneath a heavy hide, her breath forming small clouds as she watched his every movement, how he moved without sound, how nothing he did was wasted. He hadn't spoken much since that first night, but she was beginning to understand his language wasn't built of words. You always live alone, she asked softly. Rayet glanced her way. Mostly. She hesitated. Don't it get lonely? It didn't answer, just added more wood to the fire. That was answer enough. They shared breakfast: salted venison, hard-bread pine tea. The tea tasted like chewing on a tree branch, but it warmed her chest and cleared her head. She sipped slowly, watching the way Reed kept glancing toward the entrance. You expecting someone? She asked. He shook his head. Always expect something. Lucy tucked her knees beneath her. My stepfather wouldn't look for me, not unless someone offered him coin to do it. Reed didn't respond, but the flicker in his eyes said he understood the kind of man George Harland was without needing Dead Sea tales. After the meal, Reed stepped outside to check his snares. Lucy, left alone in the shelter, ran her hands along the grain of the wooden floor, rough but solid. She studied the items he kept tucked into shelves: bundles of dried herbs, a gourd full of what smelled like bear fat, strings of beads, feathers, a carved bone flute. Each object felt like a piece of a life she'd never been shown before. A life not written in books, not shouted from pulpit. Something older, quieter. Rayet returned with a brace of rabbits and a dusting of snow across his shoulders. Show you something, he said, tossing the rabbits onto the skinning rack. He led her out past the rocks, up a narrow trail between fir trees, frosted like wedding lace. The trail ended at a clearing with a small pool, frozen around the edges, steam rising from the center. Hot spring, he said. Been here longer than any name ever given it. Lucy stepped close, kneeling to touch the warm water. It's beautiful, he nodded. Used to come here with my mother. She said, the water remembers. Remembers what? He looked toward the trees. Whatever's left unsaid. They stood there a while, not speaking, just breathing, just listening to the forest stretch and groan under the weight of winter. Back at the shelter, Reed showed her how to prepare rabbit meat, how to twist sinew into thread. How to identify the healing roots he kept stored in a clay jar marked with red ochre. That one is for fevers, he said, pressing a knuckle gently against a root shaped like a curled finger. Willow bark for pain. It ought to stop bleeding. Lucy listened, repeating the name softly. She wanted to remember. That night she offered to help with dinner. Reed handed her a flat stone, a handful of wild tubers, and a battered carving knife. You stir the pot too early, he said half smiling. You burn the bottom. She grinned. I'll try not to disgrace your stew. Too late, he murmured, and turned to clean the rabbits. They worked side by side, not needing to fill the space with chatter. The fire crackled. Snow fell outside in slow, slanting sheets. As they ate, Lucy spoke quietly. When I was little, my mother used to sing while she cooked. Songs I didn't know the words to. What kind of songs? The fag ones. Foreign, not English, not even like hymns. He asked once what they meant. She just said, old things. Rayed looked up. You remember any? Lucy hummed a few bars. The tune lighted lilting. Rayed's face changed. He didn't smile, but his gaze grew far away. My aunt used to sing that, he said finally. Lucy's breath caught. Where's your aunt? In Native. Apache. My mother, though. My father was Mexican. He left before I was drawn. He never knew. Lucy whispered about my mother. She died when I was 10. She didn't talk much about before. Rayed studied her face. You carry her voice. That's enough. She blinked hard, the words landing deeper than she'd expected. Later that night, after Reed had settled onto his bedroll and the fire burned low, Lucy sat awake. She reached into her bundle and pulled out the locket, opened it again. Inside was the same worn thread tied in a loop. She ran her thumb along it, wondering what it meant, what it connected her to. She glanced over at Reed. It was still breathing slow. A man carved from silence. She spoke into the quiet. Why do you trust me? A long pause then. I don't. Lucy smiled a little. Fair. Another pause. But you're not lying, he added. Not to me. That counts for something. She leaned back against the wooden wall, eyes fluttering shut. And somewhere in the hush between heartbeats and soul, a strange peace settled over them both. The next morning, the sky opened blue and cloudless, as if winter had spent itself in the night. The snow sparkled like crushed glass under the pale sun. Rayed stepped out early to check traps, leaving Lucy alone with the slow-burning fire and the quiet throb of her thoughts. She had slept lightly, the kind of sleep where dreams ran just beneath the surface, like puss beneath ice. In one of them, her mother had stood at the doorway of their old house, humming that same tune, her hands wrapped around a bowl of something steaming. Lucy woke with the scent still lingering. She stirred the fire and noticed a small leather pouch sitting on the flat rock beside her blanket. She hadn't seen it before. Carefully, she unteed the rawhide cord and opened it. Inside was a fine gray powder, fragrant and earthy, mixed with tiny shavings of cedar bark. A sliver of bone lay nestled among it. She held it up to the light. It wasn't just ash. It was ceremonial. Rayed returned not long after. Boots wet with melted snow and 3 hairs strung over his shoulder. He paused when he saw her holding the pouch, then set the game down and knelt beside the fire. You left this, Lucy said softly. I did. What is it? He didn't answer right away. He reached into the pouch and took a small pinch of the ash, then sprinkled it over the coals. The fire flared gold for a breath, then returned to steady red. It's called chi ash, he said. Spirit ash, burned herbs, cedar, pieces of our dead. We keep it for ceremony, for memory. Lucy stared at the remaining ash in her hand. You're giving this to me. Rayed looked at her steady. It's not a gift. It's a recognition. She swallowed hard, unsure what to say. Why me? He didn't look away. Because you stayed when you could have run again. Because you listen. Because the fire doesn't lie. Lucy closed the pouch carefully, reverently. Her hands trembled just a little. That afternoon, they sat near the edge of the clearing where the sun warmed a patch of stone. Rayed carved something from antler while Lucy wore a small cord from rabbits and learning the motion from memory and watching his hands. Do you always make things? She asked. He nodded, keeps the ghosts quiet. Does it work? He gave the smallest smile. Sometimes she watched the way the light caught in his hair, the way his fingers moved with purpose. There was something quiet in her chest, a warmth not from the fire or the sun, but from knowing she was no longer invisible. She hesitated, then said, "Read." I looked at her. "I can't stop thinking about what you said. That the thread in my locket might be from your people. That my mother might have been one of you." I nodded once. "Is there a way to know?" "Not with words," he said. "Not always, but with songs. With how a hand moves over earth, with how someone speaks to fire." She looked down at her palms. "That's not much to go on." "It's enough." That night, as Reed cleaned the hides and Lucy stirred the stew, a wind picked up through the trees, bending them like dancers. The lodge creaked, sparks snapped, and in the hush that followed, Lucy spoke again. "Would your people accept someone like me?" Reed didn't answer for a long time. When he did, it was slow, careful. "They don't accept outsiders easy. Not anymore. Though many have come with fire and promise and left graves behind." Lucy flinched. She understood. She was from that world. "But," he continued, "if someone carries the blood, if they carry memory, even if they don't know it yet, that's different." She looked up. "I want to learn. I want to remember." Emit her gas. "Then you will." Later, after the stew and the silence had both settled, Lucy sat by the fire with her knees drawn up, her fingers playing with the ash pouch. "I keep trying to forget who I was before," she whispered. "Back at the camp, I was quiet, obedient. I thought that was how I'd survive. I let myself be Saul." Reed turned toward her, his face lit only by the fodder light. "And now I don't know. I'm still scared. But here with you, I don't feel like I have to be small anymore." I said nothing. But after a moment, he reached into the dirt beside him and began to draw. His finger moved slowly, pressing lines into the soft ground. A circle, then a figure, then a flame inside the figure's chest. I looked up. "This is you," she leaned forward, studying it. "Why a flamme?" "Because you didn't beg," he said quietly. "You burned." Lucy swallowed against the tightness in her throat. "Read." I stood brushing the dust from his hands and walked to the doorway. For a long while, he said nothing, only stared out at the trees bending in the wind. Then he said, voice low and even, "I can't control myself around you." The words hit her like the snap of firewood. She rose slowly, her hands stilling at her sides. "What do you mean?" He didn't turn. "When you laugh, when you sit by the fire and look at me like you see more than a shadow, I forget how long I've been alone. I forget why I chose it." It turned then, his eyes dark, but not cold. "I don't mean I'll hurt you. It's not like that. It's just when I'm near you, I want to be more than what I've been." Lucy stepped closer, barely breathing. "Then be." I searched her face as if trying to memorize it. They nodded once. That night they didn't touch. They didn't need to. But between them the fire burned brighter than it ever had. The storm returned not as snow but as silence. It came 2 mornings later, just after dawn. Lucy was outside gathering kindling near the spring while Reed repaired the roof line with rawhide strips. The ski had that uneasy stillness to it like an animal holding its breath. No bird song, no wind. The trees stood motionless. Then came the sound distant, rhythmic. Of beatats. Reed froze. One hand braced against the logs. Lucy turned, eyes narrowing. Together they listened, counting the beats. 3 horses, maybe 4. Coming slow, confident. Reed dropped silently from the roof, motioned her toward the shelter. Inside now, she didn't argue. From the low window slit, Lucy watched shapes emerge through the trees. A man on a black galleon led the way, lean, cruel facet, with a shotgun resting casual in his lap. Behind him, 2 others rode heavier mounts, dust-covered coats, and revolvers at their hips. The last man walked beside his horse. She knew that gait before she saw his face. George Arlon. Her throat went dry. He looked thinner, more worn, but the slackness in his eyes was the same, something hollow behind them. He hadn't come to beg. They come to reclaim. The riders dismounted. The lead man, clearly the mouthpiece, stepped forward and called out. Anyone in there? I suggest you come talk. Reed didn't move. He stood just inside the doorway, arms crossed. The man raised an eyebrow. We're looking for a girl, Lucy Monroe. Blonde hair about so tall, he gestured lazily, ran up from her lawful family. We're here to bring her home. No one answered. Then George stepped forward. Says my daughter, he said, voice dry as old rope. Ain't nobody's business but mine. Lucy's hands clenched around the pouch of spirit ash at her side. Rayet stepped out. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't touch the blade strapped to his hip. She's not yours, he said. The mouthpiece chuckled. You the Indian keeping her warm? Reed didn't blink. She came here free. She stays free. George's eyes twitched. She belongs with family. Rayet took a single step forward. You sold her. That made George shift, shame twitching in his jaw. It was a mistake. We've come to fix it. From behind the others, one man began to circle wide. Reed didn't watch him. He didn't need to. Turn around, he said. Go back down the mountain. The mouthpiece grinned. And if we don't, Reed looked him dead in the eye. Then you'll learn what the fire remembers. The man's smile faltered. For a moment, no one moved. Then from the woods behind the shelter, a figure appeared, brown, eyes sharp. It was an old woman wrapped in layers of elk hide and snow-white braids. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. More figures followed silent, sure-footed. Apache elders, hunters, a boy no older than 12, holding a slingshot carved with feathers. No war paint, no weapons raised, but they were enough. The lead rider cursed under his breath. Damn ghosts come out of the trees. George stepped back. Reed turned slightly, calling over his shoulder. Lucy, Lucy. She stepped into view beside him. Her face pale, but her chin lifted. The mouthpiece looked her over. You sure you want to stay out here, girl? Ain't no law protects you in these woods. Lucy stared at him. You're right. No law does. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the locket. She opened it, showed the thread, but memory does. And fire and a name my mother never stopped carrying. George's lip curled. She was mine. No, Lucy said. She was never yours, and neither was I. The old woman stepped forward then, raising her hand. She is blood, she said in a voice like wind through rock. She carries the ash. She remembers the songs. The riders said nothing. Rayet stepped close to Lucy, not touching, just present. The mouthpiece spat, you keep her. Ain't they worth the powder? He mounted, swung his horse in a circle. Come on, Arlon. Your girl's gone. George hesitated, eyes meeting Lucy's one last time. She didn't flinch, didn't speak, just looked at him until he turned away. Then they were gone. Silence returned. Rayet exhaled long and low. The old woman approached Lucy, placed a hand on her shoulder. You did not run, she said. That is what matters. Lucy felt her knees shake, but didn't let them buckle. She had stood her ground. That night the fire burned hotter than it had all winter, not from fear, from ceremony. The villagers, what few still remained, came one by one, leaving small offerings of bark, stonies, herbs. Lucy helped stir the pot, grind roots, tend the coals. No one asked her to. No one needed to. Rayet sat nearby, silent as always, sharpening a blade, not for battle, but for carving. He watched her as she worked, the curve of her back, the steadiness of her hands. Later, after the stars had come and the circle had thinned, he approached her with something in his palm, a carved token, a smile, smooth, shaped like a flame, he pressed it into her hand. Fire remembers, he said. And so will you. She closed her fingers around it, and in that moment she believed him. Spring didn't arrive in full, it crept in slowly, hesitantly, like a deer testing the edge of a clearing. The snow began to recede along the lower trail first, revealing patches of muddy earth, dead grass, and fallen pine needles. The mountain still held its chill, but the wind no longer bit. It whispered now as if remembering something caught her. Lucy walked the trail barefoot, toes numb, hands filled with wild mint and cedar sprigs. She had learned the names of things here, not just the plants, but the ways they breathe, grew, returned. She knew how to listen for squirrels by the snap of bark, how to read the sky, by the shape of cloud shadows on stone. She was no longer a guest, no longer a girl in flat. She had stayed. At the clearing near the hot ring, a fire had been lit low, steady, fragrant with sage. The villagers gathered in a wide circle, old ones with lands like riverbeds on their face, children with berry-stained fingers and bright eyes. And in the center stood Sonny, the white-braided elder who had spoken for Lucy the day George Harlan turned away. Sonia raised both hands, palms outward. Today we name what has returned. Lucy stood near the edge, heart thudding steady but sure. She wore a tunic dyed in clay and ash, sewn by the old women who never asked her name, only her hands. A cord of woven bark hung around her neck, holding the flame-shaped carving Reed had given her. Her hair was braided in two long lines laced with threads of red. Sonia stepped toward her. Many forget what blood carries. They think name is louder. Paper's stronger, but blood remembers. Fear remembers. She reached into a pouch and pulled out a shawl. Dyed in warm tones of earth and ski. In the center, a flame was stitched in orange thread ringed with pine boughs. The ridge holds memory, Sonny said. The fire holds truth. And she placed the shawl across Lucy's shoulders, holds both. Sanani's voice dropped to a hush. She is Ayesha now. The name hung in the air like smoke. It meant little one who stays or soul returned depending on which elder you asked. Lucy swallowed hard. Ayesha, she whispered, testing it. The villagers murmured their acceptance, not in applause or cheer, but in nods, soft drumming, and quiet song. A boy approached, barely 5, and handed her a bundle of pine needles wrapped in cloth. His way of saying, you are part of us now. From the edge of the gathering, Reed watched. Later, when the fire had died down to glowing coals, and most had wandered back to their homes. It came to her. They stood side by side beneath the first true stars of spring. You're not Lucy anymore, he said. She smiled. I think I'll always be a little Lucy. He nodded, then handed her a strip of leather, folded carefully. She opened it to reveal a bracelet beads carved from bone, polished smooth, strung between cedar and turquoise. One bead held a symbol, a flag. She ran her thumb over it, then looked at him. Is this? Reed nodded. It's you. She looked away, throat tight. You don't know what I did to deserve this. You stayed, he said. He was scared. We all were, he replied. But you stayed anyway. They stood quiet for a while, listening to the wind touch the pine. Then Reed said softly. When I first saw you in the snow, I thought you'd die. So did I, you didn't. And now he turned to her fully, eyes steady, voice low. You are where the fire begins again. She stepped closer. And you, she said, are where I found home. Reed reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were rough, sure. His touch was careful, reverent, like she was something holy. Then, for the first time, they kissed. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't stolen. It was offered. And it was enough. That summer, Ayesha rose before dawn each day to tend the fire outside Sonny's lodge. She had learned the names of old medicines, how to bundle herbs with prayers woven in, how to speak to the fire without demanding answers. Children gathered at her feet each morning, begging for stories. She told them in 2 tongues. Now, sometimes haltingly, sometimes fluently, they listened anyway. She taught them to carve marks into bark, to recognize healing roots, to stir stew without burning it. She sang the song her mother had hummed long ago, and when she did, Sonny sometimes closed her eyes and whispered the words alone. Reed came and went like he always had, part hunter, part shadow, but now he always returned. Sometimes with berries, sometimes with silence, always with presence. One evening, Ayesha sat by the fire, her lap full of cedar ash, teaching a little girl to trace her name into it with a twig. Rayet sat nearby, sharpening a blade. The stars blinked above. The mountains exhaled. And for the first time in her life, Ayesha felt no fear. She had not been saved. She had been seen. She had not been rescued. She had returned. And the ridge had waited for her. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of this story. I'm truly glad you stayed with me. Your support means so much. Please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel so I can keep bringing you more heartfelt stories like this.